For more on the crisis in Iraq, we're joined by Michael Shank. He's an associate director with the Friends Committee on National Legislation here in Washington. That's an organization that promotes a peace agenda. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
How worrisome is the political landscape? Because we saw this last week, we see it again this week. They need to move forward, and it seems like they're stuck in neutral.
Deeply worrisome. Secretary of State John Kerry saying the right thing about inclusive government, political reconciliation between Sunni, Shia, and Kurds. The bigger problem that people aren't talking about, at least in Washington, is not the oil crisis and the oil wars, but rather the water crisis and the water wars. So 30 years ago, Turkey starts damming up the Tigris and Euphrates River, cuts water supply to Iraq by 80%. Now you're seeing the Islamic State take over water supply in the north, the Tigris, the Euphrates, and try to take over dams, whether it's the Haditha Dam or the Mosul Dam or the Samarra Dam, and that could really catalyze this conflict in a whole new way, because it would shut down power in Baghdad and it would shut off water. We already have a humanitarian crisis now. It would just explode it by tenfold.
Well, then you saw the military basically collapse. So how do they deal with that? Because now we're talking about the other issue, which is military. It's not just political, it's military as well.
Right, so a lot of people talking about 3 separate states splitting up, the Kurds splitting off, Sunni splitting off, Shia in the south splitting off. That would not be helpful, it would be disastrous. The Kurds were in Washington last week talking about the need for autonomy, more autonomy, new military resources from the U.S. government, and their ability to export oil. I think we do need the level of engagement as if it's a full-blown crisis. We need the UN in there safeguarding water supplies like they safeguard hospitals and schools. Because if ISIS, if the Islamic State is able to take the water from the north, which is coming from the Tigris and Euphrates, what's left of it from what the Turks took, we will see Baghdad shut down, both in terms of hydroelectric dams being shut off along the rivers I mentioned, and then just water not trickling down to the south, which the Sunnis, some of the Sunni extremists want as a way of shutting off water from the Shias.
And then we're seeing more sectarian violence. Kind of, some people are saying it's a repeat of 2006, 2007.
Right.
Once that starts going and spiraling out of control, there's no putting the brakes on that, is there?
There isn't. And as I've talked about on this show before with some of your colleagues, how the U.S. government was not helpful in creating kind of separate governance in Anbar province with the Sunnis and making sure the Shias in Baghdad really kind of controlled the government there. We didn't prioritize inclusive government then. We're certainly trying to now. It's a little bit duplicitous. Simultaneously, we're playing a military hand in the attacks in Mosul by the military airplanes killing civilians in neighborhoods, bombing homes. The Pentagon saying we have no part of that, but certainly our military presence is being felt. Drones are on the sky.
You know, you mentioned that, and Ali Kaderi, I don't know if you saw his piece in the Washington Post yesterday, where he said he was a big advocate of Maliki in 2006. In 2010, said this guy's got to go.
Right.
And then basically said the White House has settled on a disastrous Iraq strategy. He said he's not that uncommon from Saddam Hussein. He said the only difference is the U.S. has spent $1 trillion propping this guy up. How could the U.S. miscalculate this so badly?
We miscalculated all the way along. We were propping up different leaders thinking they would be the savior to a misinformed, misguided invasion, and Jackson Deal and the Washington Post also critiquing Obama, but George Bush was equally culpable in creating a very sectarian government. Keep in mind, the Sunnis and Shia lived together in mixed neighborhoods, they married, intermarriage, and working in government offices together was quite common. So we created, and now we're still exacerbating some of this sectarianism.
Well, Michael, it's complicated, but you helped to put it in perspective. Thanks so much for coming in. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.